Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do my June wrap-up. So this is going to be an interesting video to make because I've read 10 books in June, which is probably the most that I've read in a month since August last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how long this video goes, hopefully not too long. But the first book that I finished in June was The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, and is obviously the last book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. A lot more happens in this book in comparison to the second book, where a lot of the book is sort of in a stalemate kind of situation. The Fellowship is split up and we see them sort of plow through this war. And in the third book everything happens. It feels like a lot happens in this book. And because we're seeing a lot of different groups of people, it also feels like it's even more happens because different things happen to different characters, if that makes sense. But I really like this one, and I think the ending of the trilogy as a whole and the ending of this book was fantastic, and it made me want to go back to the beginning and start over again, which I didn't necessarily think I would feel after finishing this quite long trilogy. I thought that I would be fairly fed up by that point, but I really liked the way that it ended and concluded, and I think in particular I love the way that Frodo and Sam grow throughout this journey, and the way that they sort of reconcile, the way that they've changed throughout the journey at the end. So a really fantastic trilogy, but in particular this book was really great, and I look forward to returning back to the beginning, hopefully fairly soon. I think at the moment I'm sort of itching to read through the entire Lord of the Rings in one go for Christmas, but we shall see if I actually end up doing that this year or some other year. But it was fantastic, so really enjoyed that one. The next book I finished was the Travelling Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa, and this was one of my anticipated releases for 2017, I think. So I finally got around to this listening to the audiobook that was available through my library. And it is basically the story of a man, I think his name is Satoru, and he has a cat called Nana. But for some reason he has to give up his cat, and he's trying to find a new home for the cat, and through that you see him going on a journey with the cat. And that's the whole idea of the Travelling Chronicles, is that the book is mostly told through the cat's perspective. Some of it is the cat sort of portraying what he's seeing. Some of it is sort of internal monologue. The internal monologue is so funny, and the whole book is very sweet. It's a lot of it is about sort of the relationship that humans can have with cats, and I think a lot of it applies to the relationship with dogs as well. And it's funny sometimes because the cat Nana has these internal monologues and sort of making comments about human behavior, and it's sometimes he will interact with the other animals that he meets in the various homes. So the whole book is just Satoru and Nana going to meet various people in Satoru's life, and most of them are friends or people that he has been important to. And through those meetings we also see back into his past and how he became important to these people and how they want to do something for him. You don't really know why he needs to give up the cat, but you realize that there must be something serious going on because he has such a strong relationship with the cat. So it's a very heartwarming story. I think it's not anything super groundbreaking. It is this quiet style that Japanese writers seem to excel at. And if you are a cat person, I would definitely recommend giving this one a try. The next one I finished was The Faster I Walk, The Smaller I Am by Kjersti and Skomsvold, and this was a reread for me because I read this I think in 2015, but it's been a few years. And this book is a Norwegian novel, or it's more like a novella because it's a very short book. So this book follows Mattia, who is an elderly woman. I can never remember exactly her age because I relate to her so much I don't really think about her age. But she is a woman who has quite a few insecurities. She is married and her husband works during the days, and he's really the only person that she's connected to on a regular or a deeper level. So a lot of this book is about her fear of dying and of being forgotten, and this is sort of strengthened by the fact that she has no social network. So she does things sometimes just sort of create social meetings in her everyday. It's kind of funny the way that it is told, but it's also sad sometimes. I especially love the character of Mackie. I think she's so fantastic, and she's one of my favorite literary characters. I really loved rereading this book, and I think it is definitely worth it if you're looking for a translated fiction, or if you're looking for something kind of similar to Convenience Store Woman with an older main character, then this might be worth checking out. The next one I finished was Swell, a Waterbiography by Jenny Landreth. This is Jenny Landreth both telling her own history of swimming and how she got into swimming, how that changed over her life course. Like she talks about swimming as a pregnant woman and how that felt and how liberating it could feel to be weightless for a small portion of that time. And she talks about swimming with a young child. So she talks about her own experience, but also talking about the history of women swimming and the ways that the rules around women swimming has changed over the last like 100 years. She talks about the way that swimming costumes have changed from being very high coverage to being barely there at all, to things like women competing in swimming in the Olympics and other things, various places that we can swim, in canals and in pools and in lidos and all of these things. So she covers a wide branch of topics within the swimming, and in particular the way that women have been able to access these fields and learning how to swim. Throughout this, there's also a discussion on the way that class impacts our ability to swim or our ability to access these places. So it's a fairly thorough look at swimming history. And in particular the focal point of women, but also looking at the way that gender and class intersect. So I think it is definitely worth picking up if you're interested in women's history of swimming, or if you're interested in reading more about swimming in general. I think it's definitely worth picking up. The next book I finished was also swimming related, and that is A Taste of Chlorine by Bastien Vivès, and this was translated by someone. Polly MacLean. This is a graphic novel about a boy or a young man who has problems with his back, and he is recommended by his chiropractor to start swimming. And so he goes, I think, once a week to a pool. And in the pool he meets this woman there, and over the course of several weeks they build this friendship through their weekly meetings. They start talking after a few times of just sort of recognizing each other, and the whole book is sort of told only through those meetings. The more I look at the art, the more I like it. I think it really captures well both the environment of the pool and the changing rooms and the feelings of being underwater, and all of the sort of the social and the spatial experiences of the pool and outside of it, all of the related areas. But also the story itself is really well told through both the words and the art. Often I feel like when a graphic novel is both written and drawn by the same person, that the art is more central to the storytelling, and this is definitely a good example of that. The story itself is really beautiful, and I think captures well the social aspect of swimming and just sort of communal spaces like this. So if you are someone who are interested in reading about swimming and you want something in a comic form, then I would definitely pick this up. The next book I finished was The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, A New History of a Lost World by Stephen Brissetti. So this book is a history of the dinosaurs, obviously, as you could probably tell from the title. And it sort of looks at various aspects of that, both looking at the sort of the fossil hunting and the discoveries around dinosaurs and the research and science behind it and how we know what we know, the people involved in getting that information and the technology as well in finding out how, for example, the dinosaurs would move or the way that they would grow to be so big, how they became extinct, how our current natural world relates to the dinosaurs, and in particular looking at the bird evolution of the birds and how they relate to dinosaurs. So those kinds of things. I really enjoyed the science aspects of this book. I think a lot of the time it surprised me. Main thing that I didn't like about this book is that Stephen Brissetti talks about a lot of people that he's known throughout his work. Various researchers, various people who've been financially important in the development of dinosaur knowledge, and I found each and every time someone would be mentioned, they had to have their own story told in very annoying details that meant nothing to me as a reader of this book. So I've talked about that problem I had in the reading vlog that I did earlier in the month. Overall, I found the parts about the dinosaurs themselves interesting, but the writing style of it sometimes got in the way of that enjoyment. So take of that what you will. I think it's still a good introduction to the topic, but I definitely have my issues with it. So the next book I finished was The Hoarder by Jess Kidd, and this was a fantastic audiobook. So the audiobook was narrated by Aoife McMahon, I think. Probably not pronouncing that correctly. So this book is the story of a man in his house and all of the secrets in that house, basically. So he is a hoarder, and this young woman called Maud starts working in his house as a caretaker. So she starts cleaning up his house and she becomes interested in his past, in particular the strange occurrence, the strange details of his wife's passing. She supposedly fell down the stairs, but there's apparently some rumors going around that it wasn't quite that simple, that it wasn't an accident, basically. A young girl also went missing, and Maud starts working in the house and starts building a relationship with the hoarder called Call. The longer she stays in the house, the more intrigued she is by the mysteries within it and starts to investigate, and she gets herself deeper and deeper involved in the past of the house and the ghosts that haunt it. It is particularly excellent in the audiobook. The audiobook is it's narrated with this Irish accent that adds so much to the atmosphere of the book. The book itself is sort of a gothic contemporary novel, which is something that I don't think I've ever read before, and I really loved that, and I loved the atmosphere of the book. I think the mystery itself was interesting and fun. I had some issues with the book. In particular, I never really understood Maud's motivations to go digging into the past, but I've talked about that in a review I did, so I will link that in the description. But if this book sounds of interest to you, I would definitely recommend the audiobook, because it was one of the best I've listened to for a while. Next, I finished How to Catch a Mole and Find Yourself in Nature by Mark Hamer, and this is one of the long-listed books for the Wainwright Prize this year. I won't talk about it in any depth here because I've done a full review of this book that may or may not already be up by this point when you see this, but this is it's basically a memoir and meditation on Mark Hamer's life as a mole catcher, and he talks about his relationship with nature. He talks about how that relationships have changed over his entire lifetime. He talks about how he has related to nature both as a mole catcher and just as a person. It's a very quiet but also sort of, as I said, meditative style to this memoir. So that's all I'm going to say about this book, and if you're interested in more of my thoughts, I will link the review that I've done for this book. The next book I finished was Jog On, How Running Saved My Life by Mackie. This book is a memoir of Mackie starting to run after her marriage collapsed in less than a year. So she found that sort of as a warning sign or a warning bell that something was really wrong, and she took up running as a way to deal with the emotional experience of the marriage collapsing. But it wasn't really the cause of her problems. It was more a symptom of other things going on. So this book is both looking at running and what that can do for a person, but also looks at Mackie's experiences with mental illness and then that in particular anxiety and depression. I listened to the audiobook of this, and it's narrated by the author herself. It talks about how she became, how she started running, how she was feeling at the time and her mental illness background. But then the book sort of goes quite deep into the mental illness aspect of her story, and it goes almost away from the running theme for a while. Although I really liked that aspect of it in some respects, I think I've never read a book on anxiety of this kind. In a way, I found it very relatable and nice to read something that I could recognize. I still think that it sort of takes away from the focus of the book, and that it could have been better woven into the running aspect of it to make it a better balanced book. The other thing that really got on my nerves with this book is the self-deprecating humor in it, and I wouldn't necessarily even say that it's humor. Sometimes she puts things like, this might not seem like a big deal, but it was, and sort of wants to really convince you how bad her experiences have been. But I think the way she does this comes off as quite judgmental of the reader of the book, and very defensive, and I didn't really like that tone of it. Although the sports aspects of the running aspects was fun, both in terms of her own experiences of running and how that changed her life, how running can help in so many aspects, and how that has also been proven through research, scientific research on running. All of those things I found really interesting and I think valuable to a lot of people if you are interested in running. But the writing style and the tone of it, I think, got in the way of making this book as good as it could have been. The last book that I finished in June was Waterfalls of Stars by Roseanne Alexander. My 10 years on the island of Skoma. So I don't really know how to talk about this in a brief way. It is the author's exploration of living 10 years as a warden on the island of Skoma that is basically uninhabited by humans. She lived there with her husband. The whole thing was sort of set about in a very quick and almost impulsive way because Mike, her husband, really wanted this position. So she sort of just went along with it and ended up loving her time on the island of Skoma. And this book chronicles their 10 years there. Everything from the seasons changing and the way that the seasons shape and change the island's wildlife and nature, the weather, all of the storms that they encounter and the difficulties that they have through the isolation of this island, the things that they've gained through living on this island in the strong isolation, all of the wildlife that's there, in particular seabirds and the seals as well. The way Roseanne Alexander talks about these things is just so intimate. She looks so closely at everything and in such detail, and insight that I think even if you're not really that big on nature writing, you might find this interesting anyway, because of her wonderful eye for detail and for her beautiful writing. But if you are someone who likes nature writing, I think that this is a fantastic book. It is one of my favorites of the year so far, and I hope that I can write a review of this that will capture all the things that I found fantastic in this book. So when I've written a review of this, I will definitely link it. I have just finished it yesterday, so I don't feel like I can capture everything I felt about this book now, but it was fantastic. So if you are someone who's interested in wildlife of these kinds of islands, like Skoma, or Skoma in particular, or if you're interested in nature writing with a very observant look at the experiences of living in this kind of place, of being that connected with the natural world, of ruminations of humans' relationship with wild places, and how even the places that we think of as wild isn't necessarily free of human impact. It's just fantastic. So I will hopefully do a review of this when the book has sort of settled in my mind. So those are all of the books that I read in June, and I feel like I'm sore in my throat by talking for this long. So I would love to know if you've read any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of these books. And also if you read something really good in June, I would love to know that as well. I hope you're having a fantastic day and start to your summer, and I will talk to you soon.